If you want to win the war, you want to terrorize the minds of the publics, it's a media war. There are a lot of technologies, cyber, but really to be effective, you have to fight the war on the minds. I used to belong to the Israeli Journalism Council, and for years I told them, listen, you have to give some instructions to the media, advice, not instruction, advice to the media when there is a terror incident, how to deal with it. Because what happens in Israel, when there is an act of terror, all media sees everything else and they start re-looping the pictures that the terror people want them to do. They conquer the media. Unfortunately, I was not successful in persuading the Israeli Journalistic Council to do that. But this session today is devoted to people who cover terror from within. And one of the most difficult jobs of journalism is, and risky and dangerous and challenging, is to really cover the war from within the areas of the terror, being inside the war zones. And today the session is devoted to hear some of the experts who risk their lives. I see some pictures too on that, risk their lives to bring us stories from the war zones. So we'll hear about their dilemmas. In my presentation later, I prepared some tough questions for you. So we will hear today from top experts who are in the field about their dilemmas, about covering the wars, and there are very strong dilemmas. But this session is also devoted to the memory, is in collaboration with the Daniel Pearl Journalism Institute, International Journalism Institute, which we have opened here a few years ago together with the Daniel Pearl family. His parents came here, and his wife, with his son, she was pregnant when he was beheaded. So this session today is devoted to him and to another journalist, an ex-student, a graduate of IDC, Stephen Sotloff. So this session is really devoted in the memory of Daniel Pearl and Stephen Sotloff. And I will read now briefly the history of Daniel Pearl, and then we shall see a brief movie about him. The world has come to know Daniel Pearl as the Wall Street Journal reporter who was kidnapped and murdered by terrorists in Pakistan in early 2002, just 4 months after 9/11. People around the world, along with his pregnant wife and family, prayed for his release. Since then, he has been remembered as a symbol of hope, a man who built bridges between diverse cultures, as a writer and a gifted musician. Daniel was born on October 10, 1963, in Princeton, New Jersey, and grew up in Los Angeles, where he displayed great curiosity for music, academics, and sports. As a gifted writer from a very young age, Danny's aptitude for journalism became apparent as a student at Stanford University, where he co-founded the newspaper Stanford Commentary. After a few years, he moved on to San Francisco Business Times, and within a few weeks, he joined the Wall Street Journal in 1990. Danny started in the journal Atlanta Bureau and moved successfully to the Washington and London bureaus, serving as a Middle East correspondent. After he met Marianne in 1998, he moved to Paris, where they were married a year later. It was from Bombay that Danny covered the war on terrorism, occasionally venturing into Pakistan. He was retracing the steps of the shoe bomber of Richard Reid and hoped to meet with the Sheikh Gilani, a spiritual leader, when he was abducted in Karachi on January 23, 2002. For weeks, millions around the world, from heads of states to religious leaders and ordinary people, rallied for Danny's release. In Danny's, the terrorists believed they abducted a media figure, an American and a Jew, but they had much more, a true citizen of the world and an embodiment of civilized values whose death, like his life, would inspire millions of people in the cause of decency and cultural understanding. Several weeks elapsed without a word from on his fate. His murder was confirmed on February 21, 2002. 4 of the kidnappers were convicted on July 2002, including mastermind Omar Said Sheikh, although others believed to be involved are still at large. We shall now show you a brief movie about Daniel, and then I invite Dr. Elisa Rubin to tell you about Stephen Sotloff, her student. Thank you.
In a place where growing terrorism threatens to silence freedom. In a place where extremism and hatred rule. In a place where violence is the language spoken and humanity is oppressed. The media's role is more crucial than ever.
Laura and I and the American people are deeply saddened to learn about the loss of Daniel Pearl's life.
Daniel Pearl, the Wall Street Journal reporter, paid with his life for his tolerance, quest for justice, dignity, and honesty.
To me, Danny's truth lies in the way he lived his life, not in the way he died. This is his own victory, that his spirit remained untouched and that his life wasn't hijacked by his death.
In January 2002, Daniel was kidnapped by fundamentalist Muslims from the Al-Qaeda organization in Pakistan and was cruelly executed.
The death of Daniel Pearl was a real thunderstorm for all journalists in the world.
The terror tried to kill the values, but the opposite result was achieved: a recognition of the need for better journalism, one which would be more influential in deciding the course for the bleeding Middle East.
Coverage in journalism has a lot to do with ethics and with, maintaining your ethics, even though, there's reasons to have an opinion yourself, and it requires so much from you as a person.
Now, more than ever, the question arises: what is the journalist's role?
Once you understand that your role is not to take sides, but to try to just convey what's happening so that the viewer or the reader can get a sense, which is important, especially in a democratic society. People need to understand everything that's happening to make the proper decisions.
A good journalist is somebody who arrives in a situation with preconceived ideas, but who allows the wind of history, the storm of events, the anger of facts to overwhelm his preconceived ideas.
The death of Daniel Pearl prompted his parents, Ruth and Judea, to commemorate his mission and establish, in cooperation with the School of Communications, IDC Herzliya, Israel, the International Journalism Institute in the spirit of Daniel Pearl's legacy of ethical journalism. The goal is to teach the world how to cover conflict areas in a balanced way, without fears or prejudices.
I feel this is an accomplishment, culmination of many nights of dreams and many hopes. We really wanted to bring it to Israel, and we really wanted to bring it to a dignified, institutionalized organization that will perpetuate Danny's legacy.
Information can kill, and in a place where a single word can change reality, whoever holds information can turn it into a dangerous weapon. Responsible journalism is no longer an option, it is a necessity. The Middle East is craving for an in-depth coverage of the core issues that will shape the destiny of the region. The Daniel Pearl International Journalism Institute aims to address this challenge by providing for the first time an academically based knowledge and region-specific training for such coverage to emerge, and a unique think tank for the international community of journalists.
We are creating this institute in order to enrich foreign journalists who come to cover the Middle East and cover both sides, not just the Israelis, but also the Palestinians. And we wish this new institute of ours to provide them with in-depth know-how and understanding of the culture of the Middle East And we trust and believe that the more they understand the cultures, the deeper and more serious will be the coverage of the stories here. And we believe that deep understanding increases the chances of peace.
The programs of the Institute. International Journalism Summit. Journalism Award. Immersion Program in the region. The Eyewitness Series, panel discussions.
Maybe one beautiful day, with the help of courageous journalism, we'll find a way to live in peace and friendship. If the Daniel Pearl Institute will help even a little bit to come closer to such a day, it is worth of all our efforts.
I would like to call now Dr. Alyssa Rubin to tell us about our graduate, Stephen Sotloff, with I'm sure his picture in our minds all the time.
Stephen Sotloff was a student that a teacher could never forget. A former rugby and football player, he was physically imposing while at the same time soft-spoken and polite, standing out among his classmates for his idealism regarding the prospects for Middle East peace and his steadfast determination to pursue a career as a journalist in the region. Stephen was bitten by the journalism bug early on, having served as the editor-in-chief of the Kimball Union, the high school paper which he revived after a decade of dormancy. He went on to study journalism and political science at the University of Central Florida. Over the years, Steve became deeply fascinated with the Middle East. In his words, this process began before September 11th, but that day certainly fueled my desire. Interested in exploring his Jewish roots, he embarked on a birthright tour to Israel as a college sophomore. He then served as the only college reporter in the West Bank, covering the Palestinian presidential elections in 2005. Following these formative experiences, he decided to drop out of UCF and relocate to the region, working for ABC News affiliates in Israel and Jordan as a media assistant. Steve then decided to complete his degree in government at IDC Herzliya, where he was my student. In my first class with him, he shared that he had read extensively about globalization and current affairs over the years, and that his top priority as a student was to gain a solid knowledge base that would help him as a journalist. He also asserted that globalization excites me, but also terrifies me, a statement that in retrospect sadly foreshadows the danger that went along with his chosen vocation. Steve firmly believed that the resolution of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict was a prerequisite for regional peace. In 2007, in a paper, he wrote, "Especially in this age of globalization, what happens in the heart of the Jewish and Muslim world is crucial to the stability of the Middle East." He worried that time was running out, pointing out that extremism was rising in the region and that Arab society is a pressure cooker waiting to boil over. He viewed education as the key to ending the conflict and supported and worked in coexistence programs aiming to bring Arabs and Jews closer together. In his view, not enough emphasis is ever placed on the fact that the Jewish and Muslim people have a shared background. There is more room to find common ground between both cultures. After graduation, Steve worked on his Arabic and began to work as a freelance reporter in the Middle East. Not one to be stopped by the lack of a defined job, he set out with nothing more than the conviction that his stories, if good enough, would be picked up by major media outlets. And they were. As the years passed, I followed Steve's career from afar and wished him to stay safe while reporting his important stories. He never showed any fear, reporting from each and every one of the hotspots of the Arab Spring. Steve's expertise was talking to people on the street, giving a voice to those who would never otherwise be heard in the West, and he did that very well. Stephen Sotloff deserves to be remembered for much more than his horrific execution at age 31 at the hands of his ISIS kidnappers. He was a serious professional journalist and a thoughtful, idealistic young man who risked his life to tell stories of the people of the Arab world. May his memory be an inspiration to us all.